Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International. I'm your host, Jero Sen, and this is Ben Kimber.
Evening, Jero.
Good evening, Ben. Now, this seat, well, there was going to be a seat for Ben Robinson. Couldn't make it tonight. He's actually doing some more planning for the show, believe it or not. He really wants to go through all the test matches. So he's going to be here next week, and we're going to give him all the questions that you've been throwing into us. And I reckon that's great preparation. So Ben's coming in next week, guys.
That's right, mate. Complete the front row.
I love it. So he sends his apologies, but he will definitely be here next week and he will be on top of everything. That's what we want. And Ben Kimber, you know what I want? I want the strike issue of the week.
Plenty to talk about. We're going to be disappointed in coming weeks when there's not all these great games to go through and all these big results to talk about. A couple of things went down. The French, of course, had a good old crack at the ABs, didn't quite get there. The Irish squeezed past Australia. We had a massive game between the English and the Argentinians. Wales and South Africa. But the issue of the week was right across the board. The last couple of weeks it's been brewing, I think, and the weekend really brought it to life. Discipline, cards, and referees. There's a lot of confusion there amongst our viewers as to what's going on with some of the calls, whether there's a difference between northern hemisphere referees and southern hemisphere referees, and just what's going on in the game that it feels like the referees are too much of an issue.
Yes, and so there are more cards than at a Vegas card night or in a casino, and I've been dying to use that line for a while. I'll be heading there in January. But you know what, Ben? I don't mind it. And I've been on about this for a long time because if you go back a couple of years ago, how many times did you see a referee go to a player in the first 5 minutes? Don't do it or I'll have to escalate the issue, meaning I'll pull a card out. And then another 20 minutes later, they say the same thing, but never pull the card out. So the players aren't stupid. They just know, all right, this ref's just full of rubbish. He's not going to card us. So they keep pushing the envelope and therefore getting over the advantage line where they shouldn't be, offside when they shouldn't be, doing all sorts of things. And then in the 79th minute, they'll suddenly pull out a card, so the referee's the tough guy. Well, I tell you what, by pulling these cards out now, they're sending a message to players, if you step over the line, you're going to be off. And one of those games was the England game, which had statistically was the worst game ever for cards.
The dirtiest game ever, England-Argentina. I think it was
which is unfair.
6 cards, beat the record by 1, 2 reds and 4 yellows. Now, you're right about those referees who threaten and don't do anything.
I can't stand it.
I was going to say this, probably the most frustrating thing for a fan, but probably not the most frustrating. The most frustrating being a referee who calls it wrong all the time, particularly at the expense of your own team. But absolutely, those referees who don't actually police the game. Now, we're going to be seeing a lot more pressure on the referees to pull the cards out and a lot more focus on what the players are up to because World Rugby has put a few edicts out there. They're trying to tighten the rules up, tighten the focus up on fair play and safe play. So there's going to be a lot more focus on the way people are hitting rucks, tackles, height of tackles, and there may even be that increase in sanctions for those who do step outside of those areas. Now, I think the biggest impact of all of this increase of referees' focus is going to be our old mate Michael Cheika.
Oh, really?
I do. Michael Cheika, I'm a little concerned that the attitude hasn't improved, and you just can't be proud of him and the team after a game when they complain.
Okay, so Australia copped a very similar penalty count against them that the All Blacks did the week before. But Steve Hansen was also critical, wasn't he, after the game? He couldn't quite work out how they could have been pinged so many times. So they were very similar in that regard, but maybe Cheika took it a little bit further.
Well, I think one of the things Cheika said was, to the effect of how you're supposed to win a game with that penalty count. Yeah. Well, mate, look at the previous week when the All Blacks
All Blacks did,
won 14-4 and didn't concede a try.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Hansen's carry-on was the same, but he still asked some questions.
Oh, look, I don't think there's nothing wrong with asking questions.
Yep.
I just think it's the manner and the tone of Cheika, particularly after the year he's had where there's been all this focus after the Clown Gate and all those things that happened where he's come out and said, no one's treating us fairly. It just feels like it's too much poor meat. I mean, what I think it is we've said it before, he's a very passionate guy. He feels like he's part of the team maybe more than most other coaches out there. He lives and breathes it. And he just doesn't, he's not a good loser. He's just not a good loser.
And I think our Kiwi viewers on our posts on Facebook and YouTube and on the website and email. Don't forget, you can email us at admin@ruggamatrix.com and we get a lot of those as well. Have pointed out that the All Blacks did it last week, and not only did they do it the week before, they stopped Ireland from scoring a try.
Yeah, so they did. But let me just talk a little bit more about what Cheika said, because I think the difference too is that when you look at the game, the All Blacks won, and then they had a complaint about their penalty count, as coaches will do.
Yeah.
But I look at the way that I think there are certainly incidents we'll talk about in the Ireland-Australia game that you might be unhappy about, and I know I was unhappy about as a Wallabies fan. But when you look at the overarching game, it was the Wallabies' own. It was within their control to win that game, and I think it was the things that they did wrong that cost them the game more so than massive refereeing decisions.
Yeah. Okay. So in that regard, what do you think Australia? What did they have to do to control the game and win it? Because they were down 17-0,
17-0,
and came back. And geez, I love some of their tries. Like Stephen Larkham's construction of tries is really starting to come through. They're beautiful.
And some really nice things to see, you're right, in the Wallabies game. I think looking at the game as a whole, that first 3 minutes, I think the Irish learnt from the All Blacks the previous week in terms of starting a game. We talked about the way the All Blacks started a game against Ireland that amazing first 3 minutes previous week. Ireland came out smashing them, right? Absolutely smashing them. And straight away they were into them. They were declining penalty goals, going for the line. They really wanted to physically get on top of Australia, and they wanted to smash away. And Australia did quite well to hang on there. I think it was 18 minutes till the first points, and we saw them knock over a penalty goal after declining a couple. And that was basically an admittance that the Wallabies had kept them out and had done the job well. But what we did see then is we saw that get away to 17-0. They got on top, and I think what the Wallabies were still doing was what we've seen in the past. They were trying to play their up-tempo game, even when they were under the pump, and they didn't take control and slow things down enough.
Here it is. Changing the game to suit the mode of the game.
Yep.
And this is where Australia struggles. And I think the fact that they keep messing around with 8 and 7 in that regard, Pocock was again impressive, but we keep saying it.
Yeah.
He's got to make a decision.
Well, let's talk about the back row in particular. I feel it feels a bit ad nauseum for us, mate, because we've talked about Cheika not winning it at the selection table enough. Yeah. We've talked about the back row, and I think there was a little bit for me of a double issue here. He went for the mobility. He went for Pocock and Hooper on the field together, but he also went for McMahon on the bench. So he was going to rely on his second rowers more for that punch and that ball carry, which he's been doing well with, right? A few of those guys have been stepping up. But really, Tamani went right out of the 23, and Tamani has been giving him a bit of that good go forward. And the kind of game where you want to switch it up, you need that big ball-carrying guy who's going to smash it forward and just truck it up a few times and settle things down. But when you don't have that ball-carrying ability, it's much, much harder. Now, what Cheika does is he wants to play his game. It's still the same. It's still quite obvious that what he wants to do is play his game. And for a period of the game, they did. Wow, there was a good, half hour, 40 minutes in there, 24 points either side of half time, where they really ramped it up and revved it and played sharp and played the game they wanted to play. But I don't think you can do that for 80 minutes.
Not against Ireland. Let's show Ireland a bit more respect. I mean, that team beat the All Blacks a couple of weeks ago and very nearly did it again if they had things go their way against the All Blacks in their second test against them. So I think you need to this is what we keep talking about, developing a different way to play in different parts of the game. And so I think the leadership is a big part of that, but who's driving that from the top? That's the thing I'm worried about. And don't forget, Ireland, no Sean O'Brien missed out, didn't play, late withdrawal, and of course no Johnny Sexton. And Ireland still won the game.
Henshaw at 12 as well.
Yeah. Still one that, so positional changes as well.
Yeah, and that's so clearly Cheika wanted to play that up-tempo game, and they could play it for times. They couldn't play it the whole way through. And I think, the Irish back row had a superb game, as we knew they would. And I think they needed to match them a bit more physically, and I think the man of the match was Van der Fleer, deservedly so, maybe in tandem with Furlong, who had a stonkingly good game again.
Yeah, stonkingly.
Stonkingly good. Watch this guy, the Ireland 3. For the Lions, for the Irish next year, you've got to keep an eye on this guy. Wow.
Yeah, I think the Lions' makeup is going to be really interesting with the Irish players. They're absolutely sensational. It was a great effort by them. The atmosphere looked terrific, and Ireland did terrifically well in the contest. So what I like about Ireland is they're revelling in the impact zone, aren't they? And in that channel where Hodge is, they just try to run over the top of him. He had a lot of work to do, didn't he?
He did. They definitely smashed into Hodge. They definitely kept an eye on David Pocock a fair bit. I think there was a couple of times David Pocock had a word to the ref about being held out and kept down. I know Cheika raised it after the game, particularly around that Irish try, and I think in the 34th minute. Now, we have to talk about that.
All right. Do you want to do it now?
I do want to do it now.
Yeah.
And We try to be unbiased in this show, and I think we do a pretty good job, but I'm going to say quite clearly, I don't think that was a try.
All right, I'm going to say it was a try.
You're going to say it was a try?
Yeah.
Mate.
Yeah. Because I don't think the Australian defensive effort was anywhere near stopping the player, and nothing happened there that impeded them.
Nothing happened there that impeded them. Mate, we've got a photo of it. You've got to put it up.
Yeah, here it is.
All right?
It's up.
We've got the ball, a loose pass goes back.
Yeah, so it wasn't pre-planned.
It wasn't pre-planned, but that's pre-planned is irrelevant to the rules, okay? Doesn't matter if you planned it or not.
No, we're just setting the scene, you know.
Okay.
It's not sinister.
Loose ball back.
It wasn't like, we're going to do this behind
Ringrose picks it up.
Yeah.
And then he charges back at the line, and he just happens to have two massive forwards standing right there, almost in the Wallabies' defensive line, in beautiful position. Yes, not planned, but they are in the defensive line, and there are two defenders who try to get to him, and it's not a beautiful piece of running or stepping that gets him there. It's the fact that Devon Toner and the Irish loosehead are both standing there. They don't have to do much. A little shoulder from Toner, and Rory Arnold and Kepu run into those guys. So you've got to say, two men standing in the Wallabies' defensive line or standing in the way have created that try.
It was a very dynamic situation, Ben, and I don't believe Arnold was never going to get him. No way. But I will say this.
You can't be serious.
I'm serious, and I'm saying he was never going to get him. It was a lame effort.
He got a hand on him.
Yeah, what's that going to do?
He got a hand on him, and he hit Toner trying to grab him.
There was no way.
And if it's NFL, mate, you can have blockers, but you cannot have blockers in rugby union.
Now, that's a bit different to the lazy runners. I do admit there was a bit of contact from the Island players. However, I'm going to cut you some slack here, because I'm going to say I agree with you in one way, because if you disallow that try, right, then you are absolutely in line with the fact that Australia's try against the All Blacks in Bledisloe 3 was also disallowed. So
Haylett, Petty and Sevilla.
Yeah, so it was very minimal contact, technically, against the law, but minimal contact. Would he have got him? No, we all know that. We know the try would have been scored, right? So if that's the case, then this should have been disallowed.
Yeah.
All right? So I'll give you that.
All right. Well, I'll tell you the other reason that I don't think you can allow it is because one of the reasons it came about was because of that loose ball back, all right? Because the Wallabies took a step forward, the Island guys held their line, and everyone was sort of looking back at the ball. But what you'll find is if that is allowed, teams will create that. They'll create a situation where the ball goes back a little bit far, so the defensive line's coming up and mixing in with their players.
Oh, it's a bit loose, though.
But then they'll use it and run through.
Yeah, it was a bit loose. It was sloppy, because there's a chance of losing the ball.
But I think the other thing, too, about now that Checker just alluding to what's upsetting him and pointing at World Rugby and going, oh, mate, you can't say anything. I've got to go talk to Elaine Roland. It means we don't get an insight into what he's actually upset about as well. So I'm a bit annoyed about that. You'd love to know, like, if Checker believes the refs played a role in his team losing, apart from that obvious try, no try for me, then what was it? I wish he could actually say, these are the things I'm going to table for Elaine Roland.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, I think there can be a situation where if you get penalised way more than the opposition, you deserve it. Yeah. There's no rule to say penalties have to be 5 each. Yeah. I mean, what's that about?
Yeah, maybe you should be able to request a review, whenever you like, based on grounds.
So that's a good point That's a good point. What is Checker digging at? Because he's done his job. He's just thrown the line out there. I can't say anything, but we're going to have a go or have a dig anyway. So the Australians need to work out where the respect lies with the referees, because there's clearly something going on. Yeah,
and that to me was not a try, clearly not a try. But one of the reasons that you've got to be a little bit more even-headed as Checker is, I think Haylett Petty's try up the other end, right on half time, was a forward pass. Right?
Yeah,
beautifully constructed try.
Beautiful, yeah.
But I think that's what we're doing here. We're playing NFL, right? We had some blockers up the other end, and we had a forward pass down the other end. So clearly there were some NFL rules involved.
Look, I mentioned quickly about blocking, the decoy runners, throwing them up the line, and I know we had one of our viewers last week say, yes, please talk about decoy runners, because they're everywhere. And it is a blight on the game. And I quickly mentioned last week, I think it's a weak way of tactically trying to get an advantage. And it really is. It's like, let's throw a couple of guys in there and hope the referees don't ping us, and we'll get an advantage because the defenders are taken out of play. Yeah. But every guy's putting their hand up saying they're absolutely interfered with. So I just think we might be able to go into more detail down the track, particularly when we get Ben in talking about that sort of stuff. So as a loosehead prop, he'd be all over that.
Yeah, that's right. The final penalty count, I think, was 13-3. in the Ireland Australia game.
Was it 14-4 the week before?
14-4 the week before. Basically, in 3 games, I think the Irish have conceded 4-4 and 3 penalties.
Geez, they're well behaved.
So, I mean, again, what is Checkers' grounds if 3 different referees in 3 weeks have seen that the Irish team are a very disciplined side and not giving away penalties, and the other team has? What grounds? I'd love to know what Checker wants to talk to Roland about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other point is the Grand Slam dream is over.
It is?
And I think, well, we predicted it, that until they met Ireland and England, they really haven't really begun this tour.
Yeah, it's over a bit, but that was much tighter than I thought it would be. The Wallabies, I thought, played some good rugby.
Yeah, but don't forget of Ireland's injuries as well. They were missing key players.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and it's a point actually I wanted to make, talking about another point in the game, and I've got another photo of this, because we talked about that mobility in the back row and what it does give you, and it does give you advantages, but whether it lets you play the balanced game that you need to.
All right, so what have we got?
Up. So throw up a photo. This is a view from behind of the try, or the moments before the try in the 56th minute, when Naivalu cuts through off a Foley cutout
good
pass.
try.
It was a good try, beautifully constructed, and Australia were very much on the front foot, moving the ball, and they were really shifting it well, good hands, finding a bit of space. Smartly, what they were doing was they were also attacking their right-hand edge, the Irish left-hand edge defence, because the Irish had their replacement halfback on the wing there. They lost 3, starting with Kearney, who went out early with concussion, I think. They lost 3 backs, and they were struggling. So they were tired. They had blokes in the wrong position, and Australia really started to hack away at them and find those spaces. But the reason I put that picture up is because what you can see is you can see Pocock and Naivalu. So the ball's already left Genia's hands. The ball's starting to go, but you can see Pocock and Naivalu setting a good pace around the back. And if you go and watch it on the tape from the game, they come streaking around, and they create those extra men. They create that space. They put the pressure on the Irish 22, and then Naivalu runs a beautiful line. So it was just a spot where I saw that mobility was paying off, with Pocock really playing an important role of getting from one side of the park after some really busy work right across to the other. And the other guy to mention is, we talked about in the last 2 weeks, and I said we're seeing good things. Naivalu, I think, is shaping to be a very, very good Australian winger. Strength, lines, maybe hands too, you've still got to keep an eye on. But really, his awareness of the game and the way he's running, I think, are very impressive.
Yeah, they are. Interesting, I've noticed a lot of chip kicks in the last few weeks. And, in the old days, it's like, don't chip kick, ban. And Curtly Beale used to do it all the time, but he's good at it. But there are a lot of chip kicks, and some impressive ones as well. And I was watching that Scotland-Georgia game. It was 43-16 in favour of Scotland. And they were playing on one of those hybrid pitches, and it was fantastic game to watch. And Jesus, what a great series, hasn't it? The autumn series across the board. But the chip kick's been a really good weapon, and I'm thinking that, with defences being so good as they are now, that the chip kick's made a bit of a renaissance.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons is, one of the questions we've had from one of our viewers is everyone trying to play footy like the All Blacks, and the answer is probably in a lot of ways, because if you could have all members of your forward pack who can handle, why would you ever not?
Yeah.
But with the chip kicks and the grubbers, I think there's been a lot of teams attempting that real heat from their defensive line, getting up fast, getting in their face. And we see the teams that then want to, one of the ways to try to diffuse that is make them think twice, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw Machinot, the French number 9, pull a couple of nice moves against the All Blacks in holding the ball up. That's one way to do it. Holding the ball up, the defence comes out a bit and creates a bit of space. But the other is chips and grubbers. Yeah. And we saw that in a few games. Mostly they're rubbish, right? They're very hard to effectively do a good chip or grubber, or to pull it off. But you can see why they do it. They want to change the game.
They do, and it helps if the surface is a bit harder. You're generally going to get a better bounce. It'll come up to about your midriff, so that's what you're looking for. But if they are rushing up in defence, a chip kick not only means that you've got forward momentum and pushing through, the big turnaround for the opposition who's defending is really hard. It's like turning that big ship around. So it's good to see. But, things ebb and flow, so people will start allowing for that, dropping a player back, that sort of thing. So, this toing and froing between defence and attack's really interesting at the moment. But that was one of the other trends I noticed. But, please get rid of these decoy runners. I'm sick of them.
One last comment to close out the Ireland-Australia game. Ireland, as I said, came out firing. They ended up with 60% of possession and territory, 60-odd, which basically means, the penalty count should fall in your favour anyway if you're doing most of the attacking play. The Irish team, I thought, were really impressive in the way they closed the game out. They had players missing in the backs. They had pressure on them from Australia. Australia played an up-tempo game, couldn't maintain it, and I think the Irish did really well to come back late. And I do want to just mention Furlong again. I mentioned him earlier in the show, but really keep an eye on this guy. Check out the 70th minute, if you will, when this guy's been in the scrums. He's been around the park all day. He's been hammering the ball up. I think he had 4 or 5 runs. And in the 70th minute, Australia's on the attack again. They're on about the 22, and you can see Furlong in the middle of the park. Ball goes left through, I think, Folau, Kurandrani to Hodge. Hodge spills the ball about 10 metres out, and again, too many drop balls from Australia when they're trying to play that up-tempo game. But Furlong, the tight head prop, has come sweeping around to get in that defensive line, got over the ball and picked the ball up. Yeah. It was a knock on anyway, but he was just still hammering, still flying, and this guy is hard and strong.
I said it a couple of weeks ago, I thought they were much fitter, Ireland, than they used to be, and they were terrific again. And the winning try was sensational. The build-up to it, the hard impact that they were able to come up with their one-on-one hit-ups was enormous, and when they spread the ball wide, it was electrifying, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was brilliant stuff.
Yeah, and that's right. And to refine, to really dig for that energy late in the game, I thought that was excellent.
Oh, especially when a team overwhelms you, when you lead 17-0 and then you're trailing, it really is a kick in the guts. But for them to come back again and keep playing to the end, finding another gear, that's a great thing for Ireland. So, well done. It was terrific to see, and it shows that Ireland are not a flash in the pan. They're the real deal, and I can't wait for them to play some Southern Hemisphere teams again very soon.
And a tough beat for the Wallabies, right? They put a lot out on the park. The slam was there. They could see it. It would have set up England beautifully.
I said 65% chance, and I reckon, they lose the next test. That works out pretty much right.
I don't know about your maths, mate.
Well, come on, okay. So they beat Wales.
Let's not get into your maths.
Hey, that's about 2/3. I think I'm pretty much spot on.
2/5. All right.
Yeah, okay. All right. 65%. You can't. And you got to throw. Did you throw the midweek game in?
Can if you like.
So because we saw the Corabetti.
Yeah.
Had made his debut for the Australia with the Wallabies.
The Wallabies 15 against the French Barbarians.
Touched the ball about once or twice.
Yeah. Corabetti, apparently, I didn't see the game. It was streamed, I think, Rugby Com, you streamed it, but I didn't happen to catch the game.
Yeah, I saw a bit of it.
The account said that Corabetti started strongly but didn't really get involved much. I think we probably saw more out of some older Wallabies. I think Ben Mowen played and Mark Gerard was the report.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere. I only saw the end of it, but it was a great atmosphere. It was pretty. It was great to see that they streamed the game back to Australia, which is pretty cool. A couple of let's move on to the All Blacks, and the All Blacks. Well, they beat France. It was 24 points to 19. They did look like it was the end of a long year, and they got the job done. And that's what great teams do. Even when they're not playing that well and tired, they still win. And France, we talked about them being enigmatic, and they certainly came to play, didn't they?
They sure did. And your point is right. The All Blacks did look tired. They didn't look like they had the zip or the spark or the ideas. They'll be down on their knees thanking Beauden Barrett for a couple of things. A pinpoint kick and an intercept.
Oh, beautiful kick.
But they didn't look like they had it going on, the All Blacks. That said, France stepped up, and it was excellent to see. You want to see French rugby back to its best, and that's a good step forward for French rugby. They weren't afraid. They were smashing away. They were moving the ball around. They had some new guys put their hands up and show they can play, and they were unlucky. They were unlucky not to steal that one. Probably a 12 or 14 point turnaround for that Beauden Barrett intercept. Because you look at the 3 All Blacks tries and let's be frank, they're kind of ordinary tries from what we expect from the All Blacks this year or the quality of play they have. They come out with a nice tactic to test out those big Fijian wingers that paid off almost immediately with that sensational kick from Barrett.
Yeah.
Then there's an intercept. And then there was a bit of a run of the mill for the All Blacks, with Falmina running off. And I think Kieran Reid, at the end of a number of phases, hit the line, popped it to Barrett. The commentators were talking about what a great pass Barrett put on, but I think Barrett lost the ball backwards. He said, oh, God, back it went from Scott Barrett.
He'll take it.
And then Falmina scored. But really, just a solid hit out for the All Blacks, but didn't show any of the sharp work that we would expect from them, or particularly tactically. Barrett, and the kicking game was pretty poor. So I think they had that tactic of getting at those wingers, but there was a few grubbers and a few chip kicks that just seemed very un-All Blacks. Didn't seem to create as much as they would want to, and there was even a crappy grubber in there somewhere too.
Yeah. Don't forget, like everyone was talking about how Ireland were going to be beaten up after playing the All Blacks and then heading into the Australian game. Well, that absolutely is the case with the All Blacks as well. They were beaten up against Ireland as well. It was a pretty torrid affair, and they have to face France, who have got some big physical bodies, was just as tough. And at the end of the year, the All Blacks have, they lost one test, and you got to say it's a pretty successful year. And I'll say this: the best thing for New Zealand was losing against Ireland in Chicago, but the worst thing for the rest of the world is for New Zealand losing in Chicago, because it means they refocus and reset for the next World Cup, and they'll be driven all the way through.
Yeah, it's true, and I think the French team that turned up against the All Blacks was different to the one the Wallabies knocked over the week before. They were much better structured, much sharper. But I think the All Blacks, Hansen will walk away with things to fix and questions to ask. I think some of the things are clearly in the front row, whether they've got that depth worked out, whether those guys are going, the way that they want them to, looking ahead. There was a lot of plaudits for Israel Dagg in the Kiwi press that I was reading. He's not Ben Smith though. I think that was noticeable that he doesn't bring that fantastic connection with Beauden Barrett, where though Smith and Barrett switch in and out. The All Blacks lose something significant when Smith goes out. So to put Dagg at the back and have the two big wingers meant that the creativity went backwards, even if Dagg did have a good game.
Yeah, you've got to keep Ben Smith around for the next World Cup. There's no doubt about that. He needs to be there. And this brings me to, which they've done well in the past with players like Richie and Dan Carter, is give them a good rest at Super Rugby level next year.
Who do you reckon needs the longest rest?
Kieran Reid.
Our old mate Kieran Reid.
Kieran Reid needs a rest. I'm not going to write him off. I think he needs a rest. He's such a great player, and he just looks tired, I think.
He wasn't, we've said it before, he wasn't the man that we know he can be as a player, and I think some of the concerns will be as a captain. He doesn't seem to be taking the game by the throat as a captain. He needs a break. And I made a point of trying to listen to the commentary, and I think in all the game he was mentioned like 3 times, and one of those was for getting pushed off. He didn't have a big game again when I thought he probably needed one. He needs a rest. Anton Leonard-Brown didn't really see the ball. We didn't see much of him. And you could tell that Hansen was concerned with the way that the French were taking them on up front, smashing away, because he pulled the ripcord early. I think he did it once in the Rugby Championship when they were under the pump. And this time you could really see, all of a sudden, I think it was about the 45th minute, or the 46th minute, very, very early. On came Rico Ioane. Also, Scott Barrett came on. Off went Retallick. Off went Crotty. Tried to mix up, brought the props on soon after, and really needed to shake that team up. And even then, didn't get the shake up that he was used to from his bench.
Yeah, so New Zealand are doing the job though, and as you would expect, so only one blemish on the scorecard this year, and what an extraordinary effort. To talk about whether it's the greatest, we've done this before, about whether it's the greatest team of all time. I will say this, I don't think it is the greatest team of all time, because of the teams I've seen up close and through the years of New Zealand rugby, because you can have a really great team. It could be the best team of all time, but if there's a team better than you in world rugby, then it means that you're sort of hidden from view, because they win all these test matches, but you could have had a better team against better opposition. So it's hard to judge which is the better team. So it's a tough one, and only history will tell over many, many years.
Yeah, history will tell, but I'm prepared to make a call on this season myself, and I'm going to stand by what I said a number of weeks back. This is a very good All Black side, but I don't think it's been tested until it got up to Ireland. It hasn't been tested as much as All Blacks teams of the past.
Yeah.
The South Africa and Australian efforts this year have been poor in both the Rugby Championship and following that. The Wallabies have improved, but nonetheless, really what's gone on, I think, is we've seen a great All Black team not get the sort of competition that would tell us just how good they are in a lot of ways. Now, that might sound like a harsh call, but it's a similar sort of call I'm going to make on Beauden Barrett. I would pick Dan Carter every day and a week on Sundays to stick him in at 5'8" ahead of Beauden Barrett. I think Beauden Barrett's a great player, but he is no Dan Carter yet.
Well, not yet.
No,
I think it's too early to call that.
But that's what I mean. You can't call them the best team ever when you've got a 5'8". I think the guy who just hung up the boots was a better player.
Yeah, absolutely. So well done, New Zealand, 24 points to 19. The French doing their bit.
There's just one moment I want to point out. Now, I haven't got a photo for this one, but there was a really interesting exchange, because we talked before about Wayne Barnes as the referee, and his history with the All Blacks being what it is. Now, I thought Barnes didn't do too bad a job. Well, let's just say the errors he made both ways. I don't think you could say he was too much on the All Blacks unless you had a real hard look at his conversations with TJ Perinara around the base of the ruck, particularly in the 45th minute. Ledevidek for the French, he climbed through the ruck and stood on the ball, and TJ was just getting his hands on the ball, and Devidek went through him, and TJ shouted at Wayne Barnes, "I'm the halfback," and then said a word that rhymes with duck, which I won't say on a family program like ours. But Barnes
Very family friendly.
Barnes said, "I thought it was a good tackle, mate." And he said, TJ said, "You can't attack the half." And he said, "You can when you got the ball." And you roll the tape forward another 10 minutes, and TJ's complaining again about rules, and Barnes is into him. There's another rule about us having a proper dialogue, mate. So you could really see, I don't think TJ handled that well, and it just showed, an example of, I think, TJ getting his ref management wrong the same way, say, Stephen Moore and Checker and the guys have. If you look like a whinger rather than you want to have a discussion with the ref, it's never going to go well.
Yeah, you got to be really clever how you work over the referee in those regards. So, yes, sir, please, sir. And then you'll find you'll get a bit of a better run. But cheeky halfbacks, eh?
Yeah.
They're always around. So just a couple other things. So, South Africa and Wales. We can take care of two things. So, Wales actually ended up having a pretty successful autumn series, but don't be too happy about it because the victories might disguise a few things. And they beat South Africa, 27 points to 13. And this was the worst South African performance, even though they made some changes.
Worse than Italy, you think?
Yeah, I think so, because there are times in this game where they absolutely did not know what they were doing. Like, they just dropped the ball, literally dropped the ball completely. And I think the Italian game was a bit different. This one, I thought, was just diabolical. And I think, and then as a result, in South Africa, sweeping reviews coming. And they'll definitely have to remove the coach next year. I've got some ideas about that, but over to you, Ben. What do you think?
Yeah, look, they've called the review. They've talked about, not in so many words, the embarrassment of their season.
Yeah.
I think, Coetzee rang some changes, tried to make a few, mix it up, bring some Lions players in and get a bit more of the combo and the cohesion there. Wasn't there. The thing that I would think would be most disappointing for the South Africans was the ticker didn't seem to be there. I wrote a couple of preview pieces on our Facebook page ahead of the games talking about what I was going to look at. And one of the things was I thought, with Strauss playing his last international game, and he's been a great servant for Springbok rugby, I thought his team might turn up more for him and he'd get stuck in and they'd follow him. Just didn't happen.
No. And that's the thing. They really didn't look like they were playing for each other in that game. And it was almost counterproductive bringing those Lions players in because I think you'd probably want them coming into a fresh environment.
Yeah.
So...
We do want to do a show on South African rugby though,
yes.
After the test matches because we've got to talk about what's going on in South African rugby and what they might need to do to fix it.
I was going to throw my suggestion to fix it, but I'm going to hold it because I want to hold it because I just don't want to fire my gun off yet because I do have a suggestion and I think you'll like what I'm going to suggest.
All right. I look forward to
it. The plan to save South African rugby here first on RuggaMatrix. So tune in, and I think it's better placed as we get into the next couple of weeks.
All right.
So, and we just want to go back quickly on the England result, 27-14 over Argentina. Vunipola is out of the test match against Australia.
Massive.
That is a huge bonus for Australia. This guy can pick up whole rucks and throw them around. And he got injured in the game against Argentina, and England won in the end, but... we did see technically the dirtiest game with all those cards, but in the end they did the job and beat them.
They did. Vunipola out is massive. What will be interesting is the back row that Eddie selects and the back row then that Checker selects. Eddie's already lobbing bombs. He's talked about how Australia will have 6 weeks on the beach and think they're the kings of Australia if they beat England. He's already called out that he wants to talk to Jaco Peper, the ref, about the scrum. So he's got the scrum on the agenda already. But in this game in particular, to finish that point, if Vunipola is out, it would have been interesting, I think, if Checker would have gone in with Pocock and Hooper and a lighter back row when you've got a guy like Billy Vunipola who's going to absolutely truck it up big time. And I don't think it would have worked. Now, just on that game, I think one thing to call it is there were the 2 red cards. Elliot Daly took out Senatore, had to go. Yep. Accident, not intentional, doesn't matter. Player in the air, you cannot take their legs out. Well worth a red card. Joe Marler was the other one, held Enrique Pareto. Enrique stepped on his head. He got a red card. Great refereeing by Pascal Guazzere.
Well refereed.
Gave him 2 cards, guy on the ground, and the guy who got a boot in the face.
So this is where the yellow cards work, and they need to clear out and make a take a real message to the players on the field by sending the cards. I'm just looking at a tweet here from Cobus Visa just about an hour ago. He says, it really angers me and saddens me at the same time to see the UK press calling the Springbok team the worst ever. So I don't think he's arguing with them. He's just sad about it. The big Cobus Visa.
Because they look like the worst ever.
Yes. Okay, let's go to the strike viewer comments.
All right, just a few this week, but let's get into it. Shout outs to Damien Quinn, Gerald Williamson, Unus Amplos Ursus, Rugby Fan NZ on YouTube, Will M, Evan Gellist, Malke for his top 5 teams, Jacob Kelly for a good comment which came in late on foreign coaches in the Northern Hemisphere and their impact on that. But the 2 guys I want to call out for the comment of the week, Brendan Paramore and Patrick Durkin, particularly because last week Brendan Paramore was complaining about the Irish commentators for the New Zealand game and saying they weren't good enough. I said they were okay. And then Patrick Durkin dropped me a note this week and said, how'd you feel this week, Ben? And the truth of the matter is I didn't really enjoy the Irish commentators.
They were a bit over the top, weren't they?
Oh, they were too effusive in their praise of nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I think if they'd done their shoelaces up, the commentators would have said, "Wow, what a great effort from the
greatest
Irish
shoelaces
there.
of all
That's the
time.
best bow I've ever seen in my life."
Yeah, they got carried away.
At one point, they were raving about the Irish scrum and how it got on top of the Wallabies, but it was a 7-man Wallabies scrum. They didn't mention that fact.
It's been 100 years after the New Zealand. So
anyway, I didn't enjoy it as much. So thank you, Patrick, for pointing that out, and apologies to Brendan.